Hey everyone, and welcome back to the clock in Prehistoric Kingdom. Today's enclosure is our last one in this time challenge, and it was so much fun. I really enjoyed doing this challenge, even if it did take a really long time from when I had anticipated actually doing this. A lot of life events happened over the course, so I'm not going to get into it and bore you. So let's just get into it. First of all, sadly, the first little bit of this enclosure is cut off. I was doing this on a live stream, and I tend to pause and unpause the recordings as needed, especially if I'm doing a lot of filler bits or I go to get a drink or something. So the first tiny little bit of this enclosure is missing. My apologies. However, the rest of the enclosure build is still here. For this enclosure, I had always known right from the beginning that I had wanted an Acrocanthosaurus as our 12th spot, and I stuck with it. And I had this idea of really dense kind of tropical forest with ramps that kind of like land ramps that kind of go up into a little bit of a cliff and a waterfall and that's what I had in my mind. And sadly, it didn't quite work out exactly the way I had anticipated or imagined it or anything else like that. But that means that I have opportunity in the future to actually do the enclosure that I wanted. Instead, we ended up where I did have this zigzagging cliff going through the back of the enclosure where the Acrocanthosaurus would climb slowly and look down over its own landscape and territory. And people can, watch it move up through that, and it's not as densely forested or any. Sadly, since I do have the wellness needs for foliage, I did have to pull back a little bit on the forest and as many overcrowding trees as I had wanted. So it's not as imposing or as closed in. If you imagine back to our previous long-running zoo, the T-Rex enclosure, I had anticipated something similar to that for density in trees for the Acrocanthosaurus. And instead, we ended up with a very lightly forested. There's a few trees kind of going up through the ramps, and mostly this enclosure is rockwork, which is boring and the bane of my existence lately. Also, I do want to mention, before I get too far, parts of the B-roll, which is the parts where we see the live movement of the animal and we kind of observe the animal in its enclosure at the end and a little bit at the beginning. It is out of sync with FPS for the rest of the video. I've been having some graphical issues, and I am in the process of fixing them, so bear with me. They are a little bit out of sync, but not too horrible, so I hope it's not too big of a deal. Anyways, going back to the enclosure, I spent a lot of time moving the rockwork, which is the basalt pillars, kind of back and forth and expanding out the cliffs to try and have the acro be able to move up and down easily without any clipping issues, without it being able to climb over the rocks, without it getting stuck anywhere. And it took quite a while, and I did have to expand the back of the closure out just a tad. And then while the enclosure itself is kind of expanded beyond, the Acrocanthosaurus cannot actually exit outside of the size of its enclosure, so not quite breaking my own rules, but just a little bit. I know the one rule is not to expand the enclosure outside of its range, and the enclosure itself is not outside, it's just the blockage walls, and the fencing is just outside. I I did leave a lot of the front part of the enclosure kind of open and plains-like. I had anticipated, like I said, a more valley kind of style in the main part with the zigzagging kind of cliffs kind of meeting in the middle with a river and whatnot. And I'll try that in the next time I do an Acrocanthosaurus enclosure, but for now, this one it did do really good, and I think it turned out really pretty. I was looking at it while I was doing the B-roll, and I found myself really enjoying it. It's simple, but it does have a very nice quality to it. I included a small pond nicknamed Ace's Pond because one of my friends was actually in the chat, and he was hanging out and we were talking, and he helped me figure out where I wanted to put the pond, so I decided that I would aptly name it after him. And it's a cute little pond with not a whole lot of, it doesn't take away from the rest of the enclosure, but adds just a nice little kind of touch to it, and I like that. A lot of times I put a big focus on the ponds and the water and everything else, and I tend to want to pull back a little bit on that in some cases, and this is one of those cases. I wanted the cliffs to be the main focus versus the pond, and I think I did a great job with that. There's not a whole lot, you know, kind of going on with the pond. It's not heavily decorated, and it's just although I do have a sign that kind of points it out and draws a little bit of the eye. I don't think that there's anything particularly spectacular that pulls the eye too much to it. I did include 2 small vivarium species at the front of the enclosure. I've been thinking about kind of moving them a little bit. We still need to have the vivarium enclosures close enough to the guests to be able to count as usable and not give that red pop-up warning constantly that is annoying. So they're just kind of sitting at the front of the enclosure. I did one for the yearling, and the other one is I've forgotten its name. It's the little groundhog one with the tusks. Very cute. I figured that having those 2 vivarium species would add just a little bit of a touch of life to an area that is kind of otherwise barren. Although I didn't anticipate that the Acrocanthosaurus would be spending so much time at the front of its enclosure, so we end up, those 2 species kind of get overshadowed by the Acrocanthosaurus, which is okay. Beyond that, after I was done the rock work, I went through and I added in some mossy rocks. And when I was doing the forestry, I did focus on moving the trees around into places where it didn't feel like I was just putting them at regular intervals, but instead that they were growing from very specific areas that just looked more natural, as it were. I mean, trees would probably just grow anywhere in this kind of enclosure, and mostly probably on the plains part and not in the rocks, but we're going to have to suspend a little bit of reality for that appearance. I did mostly just regular grass terrain in the plains area, and then for the cliff rock walkway, I did some light rocking, like rock terrain painting and a little bit of gravel, just to kind of take away a little bit of that grass, because it would technically all be rock, so you would only have just a little bit of grass in the edges where dirt and clay and sand is lingering, and the grass can cling to it and grow and put a root system down into it. So I pulled a little bit of grass away from that and allowed a path to kind of form for the Acrocanthosaurus to walk. Working on this enclosure is a little bit bittersweet. It's the last of the clock, and I've learned a lot, and I also feel like I've missed out, and I know I have failed in my own challenge, whereas I didn't have the time to actually complete it properly. So about partway through, a little bit after partway through, I had to just abandon the time challenge portion of it. However, I've seen that there is people out there that are doing the time challenge and actually following along with the proper rules, and their enclosures and builds are just phenomenal, and I'm so happy that people are rising to the challenge and embracing it. And I hope that we can once again return to a time challenge like this, but maybe with a little bit of a better thought process. Like I said at the very beginning of this challenge, way back in wintertime, it was around Christmas time, I was really sick. I was really sick over Christmas. And I had this fever thought process where I was like, I should do a time challenge and this is how it's gonna go. And I was like, I didn't have any second thoughts about it. I didn't sit down and think about it, plan it, nothing. I was just like, yes, let's do it. And it could have been better executed, and I think that's going to be one of my things that I take away from this and learn from this challenge, is that I need to pause and think ahead just a little bit and plan just a tiny bit more before moving on with a big commitment like this. The other things that I have taken away from in this challenge is the way that I build my enclosures. I found, especially towards the end, I was kind of just getting into a rhythm where I was just doing like a formula, an equation, where I was like, okay, it's this much and it's this terrain and it's this forestry and this water, and then we're done. And it was working, but it was also kind of boring when I fell into that pattern. And I noticed it particularly when I was sitting down in my living room one day with my partner and my dog. And we were watching one of my older habitats from the previous zoo, specifically the Lilianasaurus, and their little garden tea party kind of enclosure. And I realized that the enclosures that I've been doing lately have been really missing a quality that some previous enclosures had, and it feels like I kind of lost myself in this whole process of doing videos and trying to just, outcompete myself, because I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm trying to advance my own capabilities in this kind of style of game. I've never been a particularly strong builder. I've never been particularly great at, especially at the like Zoo Tycoon games, where the enclosures feel kind of bland and there's not a whole lot going on with them. So like I started the YouTube as a way to try and push myself to do better in a game genre that I actually really love. And I've noticed huge advancements since I've started it, but I also found myself, like I said, towards the end of this challenge, I found myself finding a consistent equation and just kind of sticking with it, and the builds all became pretty bland, all very similar. If you look at them closely, like really closely, you'll see that I just followed the same pattern over and over again. Go in, you put down your terrain, you put down your water, you put down your foliage, you do your rock work, and then you're done. And that's not something that I want to do going forward. So I think going forward, I'm going to, especially in the challenge zoo, and I might start up another, not just might, I have started up a zoo in Planet Zoo, and I want to start moving back into the more whimsical, well thought out, and less equation based kind of enclosures. And it's going to be a process, and I hope you all join me on that process. And I think that it's going to be fun to revisit a challenge like this when I finally find my own kind of style, as it were, instead of just sticking with this equation. As I was saying, it's a little bit bittersweet because it's going to be the end of it, and I'm going to miss this consistent kind of builds where they're all the same size and everything else, and I don't have to worry about it. I just have to put in the enclosure and then that's it. But at least I've looked at the zoo from up high when I was taking some pictures for our walkthrough video, where I'll be walking through the whole zoo and talking about all of this and anything else, and it looks amazing, and I'm so proud of it. Even though I did discover some bad habits, I'm really proud of what I've done with this. And of course, this zoo will be going up on the workshop at the same time as the walkthrough video goes live. So if you guys are looking forward to that, I will make sure to have that all in linked up in the description of that video, which will come out probably 2 weeks from now. So it'll be a little bit of time before you guys see that. But anyways, I don't have anything more to say. It was not a particularly exciting build. I spent a lot of time doing rock work and just kind of building up the back end of the enclosure. So it was overall kind of boring. But I hope you all take care, and I can't wait to see your builds. If you've participated in the clock challenge, I'll make sure to link my Discord down below. Please join it so you can share pictures and whatnot. If you're going to upload your enclosure to the workshop, please pop my name into the title so that I can find it, as I've found from somebody else. It's really hard to kind of figure out which zoos are intended to be seen. Specifically, like if somebody's trying to show me a specific zoo, because there's a lot of other zoos with those names. So you can either put just my name, Alenix, or, you know, Alenix the Clock Challenge or something. This way I can find it. And then just let me know in the comments and I'll take a look at it. And when I do the walkthrough, or I might do it on a separate video depending on how many people have submitted, I might do either some viewings on my walkthrough video, or a video all on their own where we go through and see other people's zoos. And I hope to see a lot of zoos, but so that's it. You all take care.